that I heard one time. So there was a 16-year-old boy. He woke up before sunrise one Friday morning, and he heard something in his sleep that was very peculiar, and it woke him up. And so he went to the window, and he lived in a big city. So there was an alley outside his window. It was all pitch black. It was before the sun came up, so he couldn't really see anything. Well, he opened the window up, and he heard a voice. He didn't quite know what he was saying, but he looked out and saw a man. And the man was saying, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new." And the boy heard it. He put his clothes on real fast, jumped out of bed, and snuck out the window and followed this guy around. Well, when he got to the alley, he couldn't hear the man anymore. Then out of nowhere, he just heard, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new." So he followed the man and caught up with him, caught up almost to the man. He didn't want for the man to see him, so he hid behind a car and just watched him from a distance. And I feel like sometimes as Christians, we're that man who's saying, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new," and people are watching us, and that we don't know they're watching us, but they're watching us. So we have to be prepared for that. So he hid my car, and then he saw that the old man was pushing an old shopping cart, pushing it down the street, and then all of a sudden he stopped, and he reached in the buggy and pulled out the most beautiful handkerchief that you could ever see. He walked towards the back gate of a house. The gate was open, but they heard a woman crying. They didn't know what was going on, but they heard it. And so Jesus opened the gate and walked around. He lifted the handle, and the teenager saw where he was going. There was a woman sitting on her porch crying. And they didn't know at this point why he was crying. But after he saw that she was crying, he went back to his cart. Between the breasts, but he was petting because he carried around this cart. He said, "Rags," catching his breath, "Rags, trade your old for new." And so he gave her this most beautiful handkerchief that he ever saw, that we could have ever seen. He took that old snot rag that she had and gave her the most beautiful handkerchief. And he put it, and when he put it next to his face, immediately he just started crying like that. He took the old snot rag and just put it in his face, and immediately he was just crying. And so then the rag man, he stopped. Then he left the back porch and started walking around, and he's pushing his cart in between breaths, crying, just saying, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new." And suddenly the rag man stopped and looked at these garbage cans, these dumpsters. And between them, there was a teenage girl who had bandages on her head like she had been hurt. And he stopped immediately and ran over towards her and said, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new." As a blood drop began to drop down her cheek, he looked in the cart and was still crying and said, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new." And then after that, he pulled out the most beautiful bonnet you could have ever seen. He said, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new," and started reaching out to the teenage girl. And he started reaching out to the girl and taking the old bloody bandages off her head. And he said, "Rags, rags, trade your old for new," and put that beautiful bonnet on her head. And immediately the blood just stopped right then, right there. She shook her head twice, and everything was fine. She wasn't crying. The blood had gone. Everything was fine. Still crying, he grabs his heart. Then the rag man took the bandages that she had on her head and wrapped them around his head. And like that, his head started bleeding. Blood started coming from his cheek. Blood was pouring down his cheek. So at this point, he grabs his cart and starts walking back. He says, "Rags, Rags," in between breaths, while crying, blood running down his face. He's saying, "Rags, Rags, trade your old for new." And then he pulls up in the middle of the street, and he saw a man. And by now the sun's up, and this man was leaning against the pole with both hands in his pocket, like leaning up against the pole like this. He's trying to get to work or something, I don't know. As he was leaning there, the rag man switched up something within himself. He noticed something was different about this guy. There was something not wrong with him, but there was something different. This was a different atmosphere as the rag man walked up to this guy. And the rag man asked him, he said, "Sir, are you going to work today?" And the guy against the pole acted like he wasn't there. He just ignored him, didn't say anything to him. Then the rag man said again, "Sir, are you going to work today?" Then the man from the pole shifted to get away, tried to walk away, as sometimes we try to run from our fears, we try to run from what's holding us back, and we try to run away. Then the rag man said, "Sir, give me your coat." And the guy against the pole said, "You need to leave. You need to leave me alone. I do not know what's wrong with you." Then the rag man said, "Sir, please." Then the man finally gave in and gave the rag man the jacket. When he took off his coat, the rag man discovered that this guy didn't have a right arm. That he had a but truthfully, he was acting like he had two arms, but he really didn't. He was trying to fake it, and the rag man took off his coat. The rag man took off the coat that he had and gave it to this man. When the teenager saw this, he was distraught and didn't know what to think. Something had changed this time. He gave him the coat pocket, or he gave him the jacket, the coat, but the ragman's right arm stayed in the coat, and now this guy leaning up against the pole had a right arm, and the ragman didn't. And so he didn't know what to say. He was so distraught about what was going on, and there's someone here tonight. You're sitting on your spiritual back porch. You're crying. You're behind a trash can. You're hurt and torn by the devil's. You're hurt and torn by the devil's tactics. There's something going on. Someone is shoving stuff in your pockets and trying to hide it. You're trying to hide something. God wants you to know to let it go tonight. Jesus saw you there, and He is the rag man. He's trading your old for your new. You're not alone on the back porch. God's going to bring you into this moment where He's going to give you this beautiful handkerchief and take your old snot rag. The rag man didn't take anything from anyone, but he gave them opportunities. For God to give you what you need, and all these people gave in and gave God the chance to work His magic, or gave the ragman a chance to give them something. Well, some of you tonight, you're holding your brokenness back, you're holding your pain back, and God is saying you just need to let it go. Give Him that, and He'll give you the most beautiful thing in the world. So after this, the ragman was weeping. He was crying. He was bleeding. He had one arm. Everything was wrong. Nothing was right in the world. But even then, he still continued to carry his cart. He still continued to push it down the street. And he was taking all this stuff, all this bad stuff that was in his cart. Now, he didn't have anything good in his cart. Now, he was taking all this bad stuff, taking it to the dump and trying to dump it, you know. And then he was walking down the street, about to get to the dump, and he turned all of a sudden and looked, and there was he heard some coughing behind a trash can. And as he went looking for this coffin to find out what it was, he found a homeless veteran. He reached down in his cart and gave the homeless veteran the most